You're gorgeous, you're talented, you're showbiz, and here we are at GMTV in your palatial dressing room.
It's a dump, isn't it? It's an absolute dump. I share it, actually, with Fiona and Kate, and I'm like Monica from Friends. In fact, I make Monica from Friends look slutty. And the two of them are so untidy, and this room distresses me. It actually distresses me, and I'm always tidying up, and they're always moaning at me because I tidy away things, and they say, I can't find my tights, where have you put my shoes? And I've tidied them all away, but I don't. It's horrible, isn't it? It's not good. It's not good. It could do with a wee makeover.
How do three of you fit into this? We
don't fit into this. It's like hot seating, you know. What's quite good is when I'm on air, Fiona's not, and likewise, you know, so it sort of works out. I mean, I usually get in just when she's going into makeup. So luckily, as you can see, it's the size of a phone box. The three of us are never in here together because we wouldn't be able to fit in.
I love your TV show. I don't understand much of it because it talks about makeovers and ladies' things and all of that kind of stuff. I mean, it's interesting that a lady that spends her life talking about makeovers has got such a dreadful dressing room.
I know, it's embarrassing, isn't it? And I have offered, I've said, look, I'll come in at the weekend, you know. I'll get some MDF and I'll get some Ajax and I'll start scrubbing. But no, one day. We have been waiting for, I think, 14 years now. But to be honest, the whole place is like this. So, you know, it's not like we're getting badly treated. We're absolutely not. It's exactly the same everywhere, and I actually think that's quite good. It's a good leveller. It means that there's no divas, because we don't have time for divas. Divas would not last long here.
And certainly at GMTV, it is not fun at all. Your schedule is outrageous. These people get up at 2 and 3 in the morning. It's just awful.
Well, no, it's not really, because a lot of people get up at 2 and 3 in the morning, but then they're not talking to George Clooney, are they? So it's actually all right. You know, it's more than all right. And I get quite cross when people who are in TV or radio whine about their schedule, because I think you don't know you're born, you know. You've got a great job, fantastic lifestyle. You get to meet incredible people. And I don't just mean famous people. I mean, you know, members of the public who've done amazing things. And I think, though, the time to stop doing it is when you lose that enthusiasm and passion. Certainly, if I woke up in the morning and didn't want to come into work, and I can't imagine that ever happening, that's the time to go. But I don't see it happening because it's just every day is different. You never know what's going to happen.
You've mastered the art of making people like you, and I don't know how you do that, because there isn't a recipe to that, is there? I
don't think there is. I mean, I'm very flattered. I absolutely don't think that's true, because I think an awful lot of people find me incredibly irritating. I'm sure they do. But I think what the good thing is about GMTV is that you're allowed to be yourself. You know, oftentimes on television, you're adopting a role. Clearly, if you're an actor, you're adopting a role. But, you know, if you're a TV presenter and you're doing light entertainment, as it used to be called, you've kind of got the flashy suit and the bow tie that goes round and round. Or if you're reading the news, you're being a newsreader and you've got that persona. Whereas we're all allowed to be ourselves. And that's a joy, an absolute joy, and a huge privilege as well.
And I suppose when you're doing it 5 times a week, every week, you can't not be anything other than yourself, because it wouldn't work.
No, you'd get found out. It was like when I used to work at BBC Scotland. I was working as a researcher there. I started newspapers and then went to BBC Scotland. And I was told that I would never make it in television unless I had my accent changed, unless I went to elocution lessons. This was BBC Scotland, you know, which is extraordinary. It was the 80s, it was different. Nobody spoke like me. Now it's, you know, people have got accents from all over the place. Of course they have, and that's quite right too. But that's what I was told. And the thing is, if I had done that, there's no way I could have sustained it, and I would have come over as very, very false. So no, that was not the thing to do. But yeah, we're allowed to be ourselves, which is great.
We're going to get on to the interview in a bit when we finish chit-chatting, because we must actually ask some proper questions. But I was doing some research and I put Lorraine Kelly into one of those search engines. There's quite a lot of mucky websites about you, aren't there?
I haven't really looked at them because I'm mortified, and thank goodness my dad can't go on the internet. That's all I'm glad to say about it. It is quite funny, and there have been, you know, my head on naked bodies and what have you. And all I can say is, I take it as fun. I don't take it as, I mean, there's an appreciation society, the Lorraine Kelly Appreciation Society, which is a hoot, an absolute hoot, and it's done with great affection, and I think you've got to laugh at that. And I'll just think to myself, well, at least they didn't put my head on Anne Widdecombe's body. It's actually quite a nice body. I'd love to look like that, you know. I wish I did, but I think you do. You know, that's part and parcel of being on the telly. Everybody that's on the telly has got some kind of mad internety thing going on. You've just got to let it wash over you and not be bothered by it. And actually, some of it's okay. Some of it's quite flattering.
And it's not just the internet. We walk into your dressing room and then you show me something that you were sent this morning.
Yes, I have been sent the highest pair of shoes. Now, how high do you think those shoes are? They must be about 9 inches tall.
Something like that, yeah.
Yeah, they're huge, absolutely huge, and a huge platform. They're quite tranny. Yeah, I do get sent some odd things, I have to say. I don't think I'll be wearing those. I think they'll be an ornament.
Was there a note sent with them? What was the deal?
The note just said, we heard you talking about high heels on the telly and thought you would like to see our big ones. What can you say?
People like to see you. Why do you think you're so popular with those chat shows?
Gosh, I don't know. I guess it's because I think I've done so much live television that they know that they can kind of throw anything at me, probably. So, you know, I did do Question Time. I only did it the once, and I wouldn't do it again because it was the most terrifying thing I've ever done. And I sort of got away with it. But that was really scary. But whether it's that, whether it's hosting Have I Got News For You, whether it's, I don't know, like doing Paul O'Grady or doing some mad Channel 4 show, I think people like to see you out with your sort of comfort zone as well, and especially if you're doing something naughty for Channel 4. I think people quite like that. So it's almost like, I mean, and I think people know that they can throw anything at you, because it's like myself and Eamon and all the rest of the gang. We've all been doing it for such a long time that nothing will faze us, nothing at all.
And also, you're quite clever, because although you're pretty safe on LK Today, although you touch some controversial issues, you can then do Late Night Channel 4 with a Friday Night Project and be completely outrageous. There's not many people in this business who can do both.
No, there's not. There's not many people, though, that will. You know, there's a lot of people that would be asked to do the Friday Night Project, or would be asked to go and Have I Got News For You, or to fool around with Alan Carr and wave false willies around, or whatever you want to do. And they won't do it because they're scared, or they won't do it because they take themselves too seriously. Now, I don't take myself seriously at all. I take the job seriously when I'm doing it, obviously. And also, I'm up for anything. You know, I mean, I always think to myself, what's the worst that can happen? If you go on one of these shows and you make a complete twit of yourself, big whoop. It doesn't matter at all. It's absolutely fine. And in some ways, it's even funnier. So that doesn't really, it doesn't really bother me. I always have a thing that I say to myself, would my daughter be really embarrassed by this, mortally embarrassed by this? And my dad. And that's my barometer. So there would be a line that I would draw, clearly. I wouldn't be rampaging through a studio naked or anything. How absolutely awful. But I will do most things for a laugh, yeah.
I notice in your book, throughout, you talk about your daughter, and she clearly means everything to you. You've got this new autobiography, and it really tells the story of how you made it today where you are. One of the major things was snobbery and class and things like that in the first chapter. That was a big part of your life, wasn't it?
Well, yeah, I mean, like every kid, you're born into your family, and that's your family, and you think that's the norm. And we were very lucky. My mum and dad were only 17, for goodness sake, when they had to get married, because I was on the way. And that's what happens in those days. You got pregnant, and either, God love them, the women be sent off to some horrible convent somewhere, or some terrible place for unmarried mothers, and that would be that. Or they got married. My mum and dad got married. And my dad worked really, really hard. And yes, we stayed in the Gorbals, and yes, we stayed in a place with an outside toilet, and it was pretty grim, but I didn't think it was grim when I was growing up. I loved it. I had a great childhood, and I think because my mum and dad were always there for us. I mean, my mum taught me how to read and write before I went to school, which gave me an enormous advantage. There's always been books in our house. My dad should have gone to university, but in those days you didn't. Unless you had money, you just didn't. And I hope we never get back to those days. And they instilled in me a great love of learning, that sort of real education. And that was fantastic. And I've always had their support, and that's really important, really important.
Were you as fun in those days as you are today? How confident were you as a child?
I wasn't that confident. In fact, I remember one of my early report cards saying that I was a very sensitive child, and I was quite sensitive. I took everything on board, and I'm still a wee bit like that. I'm still a terrible worrier. People might sort of think that, I'm very confident. I'm not really. I mean, if we go out at night time, say Steve and I are going out to a do, or we're going out with friends, he's the life and soul. My husband is brilliant. He's the absolute life and soul of the party. He's the one that gets everybody together. He, if people don't know one another, he breaks the ice. I'm shy, believe it or not. I will be the one sitting there, quite quiet. Sure, I'm happy to talk to people, but I'm not this kind of like, hey, party animal. I've never really been like that. I've always been quite shy, which I think surprised a lot of people when I ended up doing what I'm doing. They're quite surprised by that.
And how do you cope with being Lorraine Kelly, who everybody knows? Just walking through the building today, everybody knows who you are. You don't know who they are.
Yeah.
Is that comfortable with you? How do you cope with that?
I'm very comfortable with that. I mean, I think it's part of the job, as far as I'm concerned. And I think if people come up to you and say, you know, they're not coming up to you and saying, you are vile and I hate you. They're coming up and saying, oh, we really like your show, could you mind signing this? That's lovely. And anybody that moans about that is absolutely ridiculous, and, you know, they don't deserve to be doing what they're doing. No, it doesn't bother me. I'm, you know, if I'm wheeling my trolley around the supermarket and people come up to say hello, I quite like that. What I often get is people come up and say, I know you, and then they go, oh gosh, I know you from the TV, but they feel like they know me as a mate, and that's a huge compliment. I take that as an enormous compliment. So I think it's absolutely fine. I mean, me and my dad on Saturday, we went to see Dundee United, and then we went to get a carry-out curry. And I was sitting in the curry shop, and my dad ended up having to take my photograph about 20 times. Everybody was coming and saying, can I get my picture taken with you? And you know, now everybody's got mobile phones that take photographs, and my dad was howling. He thought this was hilarious. But, you know, why would I not be nice to those people? They've been nice enough to watch what I do and read what I write. So brilliant, you know, it's fine.
And you seem to have come from a generation that won't ever exist again, where you've had chance to build and you're now here. Seems to me now they go to great stardom, far bigger than yours straight away, and they're gone within a heartbeat.
Yeah, I think that's really sad. I mean, that's one thing about all of us really that work for breakfast telly. You know, we do have longevity. I mean, I always said at the very, very start when I got this job back in the 80s that, you know, it was like being a footballer, and eventually it will go away, and it will. You know, you have to come to terms with that. But you're right, you're absolutely right. You get people, and I get very I actually get quite upset about it, especially if they're on these reality shows and they come in and they're all bright-eyed and bushy-tailed and they think the world is at their feet, you know, and like 6 months later they're gone, because there's no, you know, the way that years ago, especially music-wise, somebody like David Bowie would go away and come back with an album and it might be not that great, although he's a bad example because most of his are really good, but they were allowed to experiment. You know, he was allowed to go and make Low, he was allowed to go and make these strange, weird albums. That doesn't happen now. It's like, you weren't number one, goodbye, that's it, good night Vienna. And we're missing so much from that, I think, because, you know, people aren't allowed to experiment, they aren't allowed to extend their range, they're just narrowly confined to one, I hate the word genre, but you know what I mean, one area, and that's it. And that's really, really sad. And you're right about the fact that people come and they become very, very famous very, very quickly, and then they're gone. And it's really sad. I'm really happy with the level of, I wouldn't call it fame, it's just being known, that I've got, because I can still go and pick my daughter up from school, I can go to the dry cleaners, I can go to Tesco's, I can do all of these things, and nobody's going to bother me that much.
And I think also the fact that you let people in makes it easier, because if you're one of these that, no, don't take my picture, then people want it more.
Absolutely. That's why you wouldn't be getting a picture of me on the beach, you know, the usual, with the circle of shame, like Heat magazine, you know, with chipped toenail, because folk aren't that blinking interested, and it's not a big deal, you know, it isn't a big deal at all, and I think that's quite funny. I mean, my picture's been taken before where I've looked less than perfect, but that's because I am less than perfect. We're all less than perfect. Nobody looks the way that anybody does on the front cover of a magazine. It just doesn't happen.
I think some of those websites would love pictures of you on the beach.
Oh no, it'd be horrible. Can you imagine how ghastly? They'd have to put my head on somebody else's body.